There's a part of Jesus' story that has never surfaced, not because there's a lack of records, but because the answers lay at deeper levels than tradition dared to explore. While many debate dogmas, few realize that Jesus' identity doesn't fit within the rigid frameworks we've been taught. Every word attributed to him, every gesture, every silence, hides layers of a being that transcends the simple narrative of prophet or Messiah. Today, we will dismantle the veil, not to deny but to expand, to reveal the Gnostic identity of Jesus, the being who came to awaken, not just to save. Prepare yourself, because what you will hear today is not found in pulpits. Before his words were recorded, Jesus already existed as awakened consciousness. The Gnostic vision points to a being whose identity does not begin in the manger, but in planes prior to matter. He is described as the Aeon of Light, an expression of divine consciousness itself that incarnates not out of obligation, but out of mission. Gnostic texts reveal that even before stepping into this physical dimension, Jesus already possessed the totality of cosmic knowledge. He did not come to learn. He came to remind humanity of what it had forgotten. His pre-incarnate identity was that of a spiritual architect, a builder of bridges between the divine and the human, between the known and the hidden. Here, the idea that he appears only as a historical figure is dismantled. Jesus is presented as an emanation of the divine, already fully aware of his identity before his physical birth. There was no gradual discovery of purpose. There was no phase of doubt or searching. From his first breath on this plane, he knew exactly who he was and why he was here. This changes everything, because we're not talking about a human who became enlightened, but an enlightened being who became human. The incarnation wasn't a fall, it was a strategic choice. He voluntarily descended to the densest levels of existence to insert awakening codes into the human matrix. His identity was that of a cosmic infiltrator, operating within the system to hack the collective consciousness from the inside out. Gnostic records mention that he had been here before, in other forms, other times, preparing the ground for this final mission. Each prophet who preceded him carried fragments of his code. Every mystical teaching of the ancient traditions echoed aspects of his future revelation. Jesus did not appear out of nowhere. He was carefully prepared through millennia of human spiritual evolution. And when the moment of complete incarnation finally arrived, he did not come as a conqueror or political king. He came as a seed, like a spiritual virus that spreads silently, infecting hearts with the truth that the control systems desperately tried to suppress. Have you ever stopped to think that maybe Jesus didn't come to save you from sin, but to awaken you from a sleep? If this makes sense, leave a like now and share it with someone who needs to hear this. In Gnosticism, Christ is neither a surname nor a hierarchical position. It is a vibrational state, a level of consciousness that few access and that Jesus is said to have fully embodied. This reveals that his true identity is not merely the human Jesus, but the inner Christ, the state of union between the divine spark and the awakened soul. When the texts speak of Christ, they are describing a frequency, a way of being that transcends individual personality. It's as if Jesus had perfectly tuned in to the highest station of universal consciousness, the one that most humans can barely perceive as distant static. He didn't just hear that frequency, he became that frequency. The shock here is understanding that he didn't come to show how different he was from us, but how capable we were of being like him. Every miracle, every teaching, every gesture of compassion was not a demonstration of superiority, but an invitation to equality. These things that I do, you will do also, and even greater things. This phrase is not rhetorical humility, it's a technical statement. His identity, therefore, is not individual, it is archetypal, a model for the human being who awakens from illusion. Jesus functioned as a living prototype of what the human species can become when it removes the layers of conditioning, fear, and spiritual amnesia. He was version 2.0 of human consciousness, running in beta testing to show that the upgrade is possible. The Gnostics understood that anyone could access the Christ state. It wasn't a privilege of birth. It wasn't an exclusive gift. It was the result of inner work, of spiritual alchemy, of dissolving the ego and expanding perception. Jesus simply got there first, or at least he got there so completely that he became the ultimate example. But here's the crucial detail. He never asked for worship. He asked for understanding. He never demanded temples. He demanded transformation. Religion created idols. Where he offered method, it transformed process into person. And so, the secret of Christ as an accessible state was buried under layers of doctrine that do the opposite of what he taught. They keep people small, dependent, distant from their own power. When you understand Christ as consciousness and not as a proper name, everything falls into place. You realize that you don't need to wait for external salvation. You realize that the work has always been internal. You realize that Jesus didn't come to be the only enlightened one. He came to be the first of a new, awakened humanity. Unlike the traditional view, the Gnostic perspective asserts that Jesus had two simultaneous natures, one physical and the other luminous. His identity oscillated between the visible and the invisible, between the body and the energy field. Gnostic accounts describe moments when he changed form, not as a miracle, but as evidence that his true identity was not limited to the body. There are fascinating descriptions in the apocryphal Gospels of disciples who, looking at Jesus at the same time, saw completely different appearances. One saw him as a young man, another as an old man, another saw only pulsating light without a defined form. This was not a collective illusion, it was a demonstration that his identity operated in multiple dimensions simultaneously. This luminous Jesus who emanated presence reveals a being whose essence could not be contained by the density of matter. The physical body was merely one of the interfaces he used to interact with this plane. It was like an avatar in a multidimensional game where the real player exists outside the screen but projects a presence within it. The texts speak of moments when he would pass through walls, appear instantly in distant places, or simply disappear when attempts were made to capture him. These were not tricks. It was the fluid nature of a being who had dominion over matter because he never fully identified with it. He knew that the body is a vehicle, not an identity. It was a tool, not an essence. His identity was, in fact, condensed light. And this light was not metaphorical, it was literal. The Gnostics described that when he touched someone in healing, what happened was a direct transfer of light frequency. His physical body served as a transformer, lowering extremely high vibrations to frequencies that the receiver could absorb without disintegrating. There are accounts that he cast no shadow at midday, that wild animals calmed in his presence because they recognized the absence of predation in his energy field, that plants bloomed out of season when he passed through gardens. These are not exaggerated legends. They are attempts to describe the effect that a being fully integrated with its luminous nature has on the fabric of physical reality. The Transfiguration, where he reveals himself radiant on the mountain, was not a unique event. It was merely the moment when he allowed some disciples to consciously see what had always been there. He did not change at that moment. Their perception changed. And for brief instants, they were able to see beyond the veil of dense matter. This reveals something disturbing and liberating. If Jesus had both body and light simultaneously, and if he said we would do the same, then we too are dual. We too are more than flesh. We too carry light trapped in density, waiting to be recognized, activated, released. While dogma portrays him as a savior, Gnosticism presents him as an awakener. Jesus' true identity is not that of someone who carries you, but of someone who points you in the right direction. He did not come to pay for sins. He came to ignite consciences. His role was to provoke a rupture, to awaken the divine spark in every human being, and to show that the true prison was never the world, but ignorance about who we are. Think of Jesus as a spiritual alarm clock. He doesn't do the work for you. He wakes you up so you can do the work. He doesn't carry your backpack. He shows you that you have legs to walk. He doesn't solve your problems. He reveals that you have the power to dissolve them. This is a radically different identity from the one we were taught. His identity, then, is that of an interdimensional guide who opens inner portals. Each parable was an activation code. Each confrontation with Pharisees was a demonstration of how to question external authority. Each miracle was proof that the laws of physics respond to awakened consciousness. He didn't do these things to impress. He did them to inspire imitation. The Gnostics understood that within each human being there is a dormant divine spark. Not a potential spark that needs to be created, but a real spark that needs to be remembered. Jesus did not come to plant something new in you. He came to awaken something old, something that has always been there, but you have forgotten about yourself. And this awakening is not gentle. It is not comfortable. Jesus was confrontational, challenging, destabilizing. He overturned tables, broke traditions, exploded comfortable narratives, because awakening hurts. It demands that you admit you've been asleep. It demands that you abandon the false identities you've built. It demands the death of the ego for the birth of the essence. True salvation, in the Gnostic view, is not being rescued from an external hell. It is being freed from an internal hell, the hell of unconsciousness, of identification with falsehood, of spiritual amnesia. And Jesus, as an awakener, came to poke at this wound, to provoke this remembrance, to force this expansion. There's a reason why he was so loved by some and so hated by others. Those who were ready to awaken recognized him as a liberator. Those who were comfortable in their slumber saw him as a threat. His mere presence was a mirror, revealing where you were on the journey of consciousness, and mirrors can be uncomfortable when you don't like what they reflect. The Gnostic identity of Jesus reveals a being who did not come to found religion, but to liberate from religion. He challenged structures, questioned traditions, and shattered literal interpretations. His message was not ritualistic, but transformative. In this respect, Jesus reveals himself as someone who understands that truth only flourishes when the soul is free. Observe how he treated the religious establishment of his time, not with reverence, but with sharp criticism. Whitewashed tombs, he called them, hypocrites, blind leading the blind. He clearly saw how religion had become a tool of control instead of a vehicle for liberation, how it had replaced direct experience of the divine with obedience to human intermediaries. It's no surprise that his speech was so confrontational. He wasn't attacking faith, he was attacking imprisonment. He was attacking the idea that you need a priest, ritual, a temple, sacrifice to reach the divine. He was literally saying, you don't need any of that, you already are that. And that message was poison to the system. His true identity emerges here as that of a liberator of consciousness, a spiritual revolutionary who understood that the greatest control comes not from physical chains, but from mental chains, from limiting beliefs that make you bow down when you should rise up, from doctrines that teach dependence when they should teach sovereignty. Jesus healed on the Sabbath intentionally, not because he needed to, because he wanted to demonstrate that human rules about the sacred are arbitrary. The sacred doesn't obey a calendar. It doesn't follow protocol. You don't ask permission. He touched lepers, talked to prostitutes, ate with tax collectors, not because he was kind, but because he was exploding categories of pure and impure that kept people segregated and controllable. And when he said, I will destroy this temple, and in 3 days I will raise it up, He wasn't talking about stones. He was talking about systems. He was announcing the end of religion based on external places and the beginning of religion based on inner consciousness. The temple is not a building, it is you. And when you awaken that, you become your own priest, your own altar, your own path. Organized religion never forgave Jesus for this. It tried to domesticate him, turn him into an institutional mascot, create a new religion in his name, the very thing he was trying to destroy. The irony is brutal. The liberator became a symbol of a new prison. The questioner of authority became a justification for new authorities. The system breaker became a central piece of a new system. But for the Gnostics, who understood the essence, Jesus remained what he always was, the virus that infects religious systems from within, planting seeds of their own destruction. Because wherever his true teachings are studied, without institutional filters, they produce the same effect: liberation, autonomy, awakening. Jesus' identity reaches its deepest point when he states that the kingdom is within you. Indeed, for the Gnostics, this is the phrase that echoes his true mission: to show that God is not in temples, scriptures, or authorities, but in the core of being. Jesus reveals a shared divine identity, dissolving the distance between him and us. This is perhaps the most revolutionary statement ever made, and also the most suppressed. Because if the kingdom, all power, all presence, all truth is within you, then you don't need intermediaries. You don't need institutions. You don't need anyone telling you what is sacred and what is not. You become your own spiritual authority. This vision destroys spiritual segregation. It destroys hierarchies. It destroys the idea that some are special and others are ordinary. It destroys entire economies built on selling access to the divine. Jesus wasn't being poetic when he said this. He was being technical. He was literally mapping where divinity resides. Not out there, but within. What he is, you can be. What he accesses, you also access. The shock: Jesus wasn't placing himself above others. He was paving the way. He was saying, look what's possible when you remember who you are. Look what happens when you remove the layers of false identity. Look at the power that already exists within you, just waiting to be recognized. The Gnostics developed entire techniques based on this teaching. Meditations to descend to the inner kingdom. Practices to silence the noisy mind and hear the voice of the divine spark. Methods to dissolve the ego and reveal the essence. All this because they took seriously what Jesus said: the treasure is buried within you, not in distant heavens, not in apocalyptic futures, now, here, inside. And when you find that inner kingdom, everything changes. You stop searching outside. You stop asking for permission. You stop feeling small, unworthy, inadequate. Because you discover that you carry within yourself the same essence that Jesus demonstrated. You discover that the difference between you and him is not one of nature, but of consciousness. He knew, you forgot, but forgetting doesn't change the reality of who you are. This teaching was so dangerous that it was systematically erased. Gospels that emphasized it were declared heretical. Groups that practiced it were persecuted. Why? Because people who discover the inner kingdom do not obey blindly. They are not afraid. They do not submit easily. They become uncontrollable in the best sense, free. Can you feel the change that happens when you understand that you don't need to look for God anywhere because he is already working through you? If this realization is changing something in you right now, leave a like and share so that more people can awaken to this. After the resurrection, Jesus emerges with an even more mysterious identity. It is not the same body, nor the same limitations. His appearance changes, his presence intensifies, and in Gnostic texts, he manifests as pure, enlightened consciousness. His identity after the resurrection is no longer human. It is energetic, expansive, limitless. The accounts are fascinating. Mary Magdalene doesn't recognize him immediately. The disciples on the road to Emmaus walk with him for hours without realizing who he is. He appears in locked rooms, disappears suddenly, eats fish to prove he is real, but also walks through walls. What is this? It is someone who is no longer subject to the laws of dense matter. He does not return to prove power, but to show destiny, to reveal what humanity will be like when the soul dominates matter. The resurrection was not just about Jesus. It was a demonstration of what happens when consciousness completely transcends identification with physical form. It was a preview of the evolutionary destiny of the human species. Jesus' ultimate identity is the model of what we become when we fully awaken. He was showing the resurrected body, not in the religious sense of reanimated flesh, but in the Gnostic sense of consciousness that has built for itself a less dense, more responsive, freer vehicle. A body that fully obeys the will of the consciousness that inhabits it. The Gnostics taught that we will all eventually undergo this transformation, not in a single apocalyptic event, but as a gradual evolutionary process where consciousness learns to shape matter instead of being shaped by it. The resurrected Jesus was the practical demonstration, the proof of concept that this is possible. And there is another crucial detail. After the resurrection, he spends more time teaching. The 40 days between resurrection and ascension are filled in Gnostic texts with profound teachings that he had not shared before. Why? Because now the disciples were ready. The shock of death and resurrection had broken their last resistances. Now they could hear deeper truths. In these post-resurrection teachings, Jesus speaks openly about spiritual cosmology, about levels of consciousness, about the nature of reality as a mental construct, about how to transcend the cycle of reincarnation through knowledge. He was no longer speaking in parables to crowds. He was transmitting Gnosis, direct, experiential, transformative knowledge. His identity at this stage is that of an ascended master who returns temporarily to ensure that the seed has been planted correctly, to ensure that at least some have understood the essence and could perpetuate it. He knew that the message would be distorted. He knew that religious systems would try to capture it. So he left codes, layers, levels of understanding that would only be accessible to those who truly sought them. The most unsettling and at the same time most liberating revelation is that Jesus never wanted to be venerated as unattainable. His true identity is a mirror. He came to show what already exists within you. In Gnosticism, Jesus is not the end. He is the beginning. He is not the only enlightened one. He is the first of many. This is the truth that reorganizes everything. Jesus as a mirror means that every quality you admire in him exists within you as dormant potential. Every ability he demonstrated is encoded in your own conscious structure. Every level of perception he achieved is accessible when you remove the blocks that prevent access. Your identity is a reminder that the divine spark is not distant, it is dormant, waiting to be activated. And when you realize this, everything changes. Because what he was, you are destined to remember that you also are. Not as a copy, but as a unique expression of the same essence. Just as two rays of sunlight are not identical, but both are light, you and Jesus share a source, but express it uniquely. The Gnostics had a powerful phrase, Jesus was Christ. You can become Christ. Not in the sense of replacing him, but of achieving the same state of consciousness that he achieved, of accessing the same frequency, of dissolving the same illusions, of awakening the same inner divinity. He pioneered the path that everyone will eventually tread. And here's the crucial point. As long as you keep him on a distant pedestal, you're safe, comfortable, because pedestals create distance. They create the illusion that he was special, I'm ordinary. But when you understand Jesus as a mirror, the comfort ends. Because now you have responsibility. Now you can no longer use your ordinary humanity as an excuse to remain small. Jesus, as a mirror, destroys all your justifications for not waking up. He didn't have advantages you don't have. He didn't receive special help from heaven. He simply remembered first. He removed the veils first. He integrated the polarities first. He transcended the illusion first. But the path he opened is available. The door he unlocked is open. The map he drew is accessible. Every time you meditate and silence your chattering mind, you are following Jesus. Every time you choose love instead of fear, you are imitating Jesus. Every time you question external authority and seek inner truth, you are honoring Jesus, not through rituals, but through transformation, not through worship, but through application. And perhaps the greatest gift Jesus gave us was not dying for us, but living in front of us, showing us what is possible, breaking the ceiling of what humans thought they could be, expanding the definition of human to include the divine, not as a strange mixture, but as a natural integration, as a return to the original design that has been forgotten. When you look at Jesus and see a mirror, you stop idolizing and begin to integrate. You stop worshiping and begin to apply. You stop asking for external salvation and begin to activate internal liberation. And this change of orientation is the true meaning of following Jesus. Not following him as a sheep follows a shepherd, but following him as a student follows a master, with the intention of eventually becoming a master as well. The identity of Jesus that you discovered today is not the one you were taught in church. It is deeper, more unsettling, more liberating. He was not the only Son of God to come and save you from eternal punishment. He was the first wave of a new humanity, coming to awaken you from a millennial slumber. He was the master who broke chains to show that you too can break them. He was the light that shone in the darkness to prove that you too can shine. And if this resonates with you, if something inside has begun to vibrate differently, then your awakening has already begun. Now you have a choice. You can close this video and return to the comfortable and safe version of Jesus that never truly challenged you. Or you can take the next step on this journey of discovery, expansion, and remembrance. If you choose the second path, leave a comment saying which of these revelations impacted you the most. Turn on notifications, because the next videos will delve even deeper into these mysteries that have been buried for centuries. And share with someone who needs to see beyond dogma. The identity of Jesus has been revealed. Now it's yours that is about to awaken.